Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, good night to everyone who is listening in, to everyone who is watching this special program from the Writers Bureau of the Love app. Today is our first session for the year 2023 and our second session in our series of speaking in the Writers Bureau about authorship, about writing, and later on about publishing your thoughts and your book. Before all of that, let me wish everyone a very blessed 2023. And for all Chinese who are watching, we are in the middle of the Lunar New Year. 恭喜发财. Before, and since all the greetings are over, let me introduce our esteemed speakers. And we have Yvette. Yvette is an author, and she has, Yvette is an author, and so is Elizabeth. Both of them have been with us in our sessions during the first one that we had. She is an author and a public speaker, a former journalist. She's a mother of 3, including a middle son with a dual diagnosis of autism and Down syndrome. Her youngest son was born with a congenital heart disorder and in 2010 underwent double bypass open heart surgery at the age of 5. She's a grandmother of 1 as well. A Toastmaster of 8 years standing, she has authored articles, written short stories, as well as independently published the middle grade trilogy, The Chronicles of Aidan Weaver, in 2020. Yvette lives with her family in New Zealand. We are so happy to have her with us. We also have Elizabeth Viljoen, who's a storyteller. She's also a student of storytellers with a master's in literature. She has won several prizes for her studies, the Marius Joost Prize for the Best Afrikaans Master's Dissertation, the Human and Rousseau Publishers Prize for the Best Student completing an honors master's degree in Afrikaans for 2 years, the Human and Rousseau Prize for Exceptional Performance in the Department of Afrikaans and Theory of Literature, and a Van Ewijk Foundation bursary. Early mornings, when still in a dream state, she writes creative stories. At the moment, she's busy writing a memoir of her late father. She has completed her first novel, which is now in the editing phase. She also writes or records stories about real people and businesses. And she's a copywriter and interviewer. She wants everyone to have a voice. Hence, she is also an academic tutor for literature students and a Toastmasters International Area Director. The stage is yours, ladies. Tell us more about writing, how to be an author. We're all waiting to hear this in our panel discussion for today. The first question I have for you would be, what are the do's and don'ts of being in a critique group? What are the do's and don'ts of being in a critique group? Yvette, could you take us through that?
Yes, thank you, Mary. Hi, everybody, and happy Lunar New Year. The do's and don'ts of being in a critique group. The very first thing that comes to mind for me with critique is to be aware that when you are critiquing somebody's writing, somebody's stories, that you are critiquing that person's creative baby. And I think it's really important to think of it in terms of, somebody said it to me once, not to hurt someone's soul. So to be aware that our creative work, it's so precious to us, and it's so dear to us, and it is us. When we are putting our work out there for critique, we're so vulnerable, and you have to be really aware of that and keep that in mind. Every single negative thing that has been said to me by people in critique, I remember. I have not forgotten a single negative thing that has been said to me over the years. It can be so hurtful to people. It can really damage people's confidence, their progress. An example is, I showed the first book in the Chronicles of Aidan Weaver to someone, and they said to me, everybody has that, every author has that book in their repertoire that should stay in the bottom drawer and never see the light of day. And this is that book. And I was absolutely horrified. I have learned many lessons about that particular part of critique, about being careful of people and being sensitive to people's hearts and not to hurt them. As a Toastmaster, I usually use the CRC technique with critique as well, which is commend, recommend, commend. So if you put the hard-hitting stuff in the middle of, I really loved this story, and then finish it off with, wow, I'm going to go home thinking about that because it was a really fabulous piece of work, then we can more withstand the criticism when it comes. So it's nice to say something nice first and then last, and then put that hard-hitting stuff in the middle. And with the do's of critique, the way I see it, I more or less critique from a point of view of what's the word for it? Instinct. So when I am reading something, I will instinctively feel where it drops off. Now, at the moment, I'm reading an amazing book by a master teacher and author, George Saunders, A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. And he said that what he tells his students is to critique as if you have a Y and an N on your forehead. So you've got a yes and a no. And when you are reading the piece of work, which way does the needle go as you're reading? Is it going towards, yes, this is great? Or is it going towards, no, something's not right? And you've got to bring that fine-tune awareness into it, where you're being aware which way you're going. And that is having that third-person perspective of the reader, where the reader is going to feel that way. They're going to really be energized by some parts, but where they drop off, that's what you need your critique partners for, to show you those points, to the sort of soft points and the low points where it needs a bit of work. And so my advice is to trust your instincts, trust your own feeling as a reader, put that across, however, always couch it with something nice to say, and really be aware that that's someone's baby you are critiquing. So be careful how you do it. That's my answer. I'll pass it over to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, what do you think of the do's and don'ts of critique?
Yeah, I love what you've said, and being in a critique group with you, I can really say that it helps me to be in a group where people are supportive, but also helping to make the work better. I think both of those are very important. And when you use the CRC method, the commend, recommend, and commend of Toastmasters, then it's not so devastating when you hear that you need to change things. For my novel, so I'm not as experienced as Yvette, but for my novel, I've been in 2 critique groups. The first one went through it, and what they mostly critiqued on was what worked well and what didn't work. So I could figure that out, and it was an important phase of writing that novel. Now with the group where I'm with Yvette, it's the second edit. And the focus for that book is also what works and what doesn't work, but also a little bit more focus on the grammar, because I know that that might be a weakness for me as a second language English speaker. So I think every critique group will be different, the dynamic within the group, but finding a group of people who are like-minded, enjoy the same kind of stories that you are, is important. But the most important thing is that people will be supportive. If you're in a group that's just going to tell you how terrible you are, then, I mean, there's no use staying there, because how will you grow if you are diminished to not being a good writer at all? So I do think that it's really important to have that supportive structure. But the other thing that I find important is that when you are in a critique group, then it's as if you have an accountability partner. If you have a routine of writing, it's fine, but sometimes life just happens and you don't get to it. And then you're reminded, this week it will be the critique group, and it helps you to focus and to start writing again so that you can have something to read or to produce for that group. So there are so many do's and don'ts, but also so many benefits of being in a critique group. Back to you, Mary.
Yes, very true. Very true. I agree totally with both of you. Particularly Yvette's message is that of what we call in Toastmasters, the sandwich method, where you say something positive towards in the beginning and the end. We close it off with something positive, but the middle part would be the recommendation or missed opportunities. Some of the Toastmasters call it the missed opportunities. Yeah, totally agree with that, because we don't want to crush someone. And I also totally agree with Elizabeth, where she talks about accountability. We all need accountability partners. If not, we are just going to derail, not only in writing, but in anything in life. We really need accountability partners. And we choose people who what we need. For example, if it's writing, the accountability partner would also be a writer. If it's finances, the accountability partner would be a financial consultant. Likewise, in every area of our lives, we definitely do need accountability partners. And that's something I missed in my life, but now I realize the value of it. The new generation is so lucky. They know about these things. All right, great. Let's go back. Let's go to the next question. What qualities do I need to have as a writer? Very important question. What qualities do I need to have as a writer? Elizabeth, could you take that one first?
Mary, well, again, it will be different for different people. I do think that there are a few things that we all share as writers. First, we are creative thinkers. So we always find stories where other people will just find facts. So you need to be very creative as a writer. Something that I find important is that you really need to love writing and reading and storytelling. If you don't have all three of those, then it won't help. I see too many people trying to write poems, but they hardly ever read poems. So they don't have that, they don't share that love of poetry. And how do you want to write poems if there's nobody going to read it? So it's like if you want to take, then you also need to give. You also need to read poetry, and it will expand your ideas. It will expand your creativity. And then also the importance of trying to cultivate your own voice. I mean, you read poetry or you read novels, but you don't want to write exactly the same as someone else, because then you're just copying what they're saying. You're not being a writer. You can just as well be artificial intelligence. I think that's the difference between being a creative writer and being an AI writer. You can put into a computer and it will give you back someone's style, but that's not your style. And I think that's what makes a writer unique. What do you think, Yvette?
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, I think there is so much to being a writer that people don't realize. You hear a lot of people, I've never, in my entire time of being a writer, I've never heard so many people say, I'd like to write a book. I'd like to be a writer. And I believe it's perceived as easy. One day I'm just going to flick off a book and put it up, and that's that. As a matter of fact, being a writer takes an incredible amount of self-discipline. You have to be incredibly self-disciplined to be a writer, because you don't have a boss, you don't have workmates around you who are taking note of how much you're getting done in a day. It is all up to you. So you have to be your own taskmaster, and you have to be accountable to yourself for how much you are achieving. So you need that self-discipline and incredible amounts of patience. It takes so long, much longer than you have ever imagined to actually write a book. You have to have patience upon patience. You have to be tolerant, incredibly tolerant of the process, because it takes time, and you need to be able to take that time. You need to put the time into it. You cannot rush a book out there. A rushed book is a waste of time, in my view. You need resilience as a writer, because the process is very lengthy, it's very long-winded, it's very difficult. It is difficult to write a book. It is a difficult process. So you need that resilience and that stamina, that you can keep bringing that same good energy to the work. You can't just begin to tire of it and then run out of energy for it. You've got to every day come back with that good energy for it and feed it with your best, always your best, as if you've got a boss over you like that. You need to give your best to the page every time you come to it. You have to have high standards, really high standards. My feeling about creative writing and all of that good juice that goes into it, I think creative writing and being a writer of fiction takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of selfhood. I feel that as I have gotten older, I may have told this story before, but back when I very, very first began, and I was started out at 17, I did a course, a short writing course with a very well-established Marie Stuttard. She's got quite a few books out, writer. And I remember her saying to me, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 17. And she said, "Well," and this is her course. She wants me to take her course and pay her the money. And she's saying to me, "My advice to you is put down your pen and go out and live your life. Get some experience under your belt, and then come back to your writing." Well, of course, I was an absolute born to be writer, and I could not stop. So I did not take her advice at all. I continued to plow along painfully and learn my lessons the hard way. And now that I am a mature writer, I look back and I know what she meant. I absolutely understand what she was trying to tell me. The more experience, the more life lessons you have to bring to your work, the better. So I do believe that it takes a lot of maturity. And if you're not a mature writer, if you are a young writer and you feel driven to the page, then go ahead. Don't let anybody stop you. I didn't. I kept on going. However, I certainly do feel that as I've gotten older, I'm able to bring more to it. And I have more of that stamina, more of that resilience that I need to be able to keep plodding and putting in those hours and hours and hours of work. Back to you, Mary.
Thank you, Yvette. Thank you, Elizabeth. That was a reality check there. reality versus expectations. And we need to be realistic before we go into writing. And the word that came to my mind was passion. If you have passion for writing, passion for reading, definitely you can succeed in the end. That's what I feel. It's the passion that is required. And Yvette explained that very clearly. And Elizabeth, the word AI writing came to mind. And I was just thinking, once we go into AI writing, wow, that's going to be a different modality, different platform altogether. And I think, maybe I could be incorrect because we're still getting onto that, plagiarism may be a factor here. But again, we can always weed that one out. But that's what's going to happen. It's going to take away the creativity and the imagination of the human mind, the human sight, and our experiences away. But again, AI writing is very new. I could be just, again, thinking it's going to be that way. Perhaps as it moves along, AI writing may become the method of writing in the future. We don't know where this is going. At least I don't. All right. So we have the last final chat. And the question on this one would be, what do I do if I have writer's block? I'm sure writers, amateurs, even seasoned writers go through writer's block, sometimes for a day, a week, months. There are times when authors have shared that they have put the whole manuscript away for a few months, and then when it strikes back again, they come back to it. Please tell us, Elizabeth and Yvette, how do you manage, or what do you do if someone has writer's block? Over to you.
The first thing I would say is that if you are just writing at your leisure and it's nothing that you are particularly driven to get out with a deadline in mind, then if writer's block comes along, go ahead and don't write for a while and come back to it. However, if you are, as we're using the word passion, a passionate writer, and you are driven and you have a goal in mind, then treat it like a job and write every day, no matter what. When I did one of the courses I did with Kate de Goldie back in the day, she wanted us to do, and they call it the morning pages in some places, to write at the same time, same place, every day. And Kate said, she said, I don't care whether you write your shopping list or write blah, 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 but sit with your pen in your hand, or if you're writing on a computer, at your computer, and write. So you do the motion of the writing every day, even if you are not inspired and there is nothing coming to you whatsoever, and you don't have a single thought in your mind about what to write, you still sit down and write. And through that mechanical, more or less, process of being in that place with your tools in front of you, whatever they are, and going through the motions, then eventually, because when I was doing the course with Kate, and we had to start every day that way with our 10 minutes, she had 10 prescribed minutes, you can do however much you like, but we would sit and do that every day. And sometimes I didn't have anything to write and I would write blah, blah, blah. But sooner or later, I was then writing sentences, and I found it actually was a way in. And it's sort of a way of bypassing your rational mind and your doubts and all the thoughts that come in that tell us, oh, I can't do it. It's impossible. And all these things that we tell ourselves that are just negative self-talk, it sort of bypasses those, and you get into like automatic writing almost. And then you're able to access the muse, the higher powers, whatever it is, whoever works with you, and get that prose onto the page. That's my advice for anybody who has writer's block. Do it anyway. Over to you, Elizabeth.
I completely agree. For me, I have to have a dedicated time, a dedicated space, rituals, tools. I need silence. So that's why I write early morning, because fortunately the rest of my family aren't morning people. So they're still asleep. I'm still in a dream state. It helps me to be able to focus. I have to have a cup of coffee or tea next to me. I sometimes forget to drink it, it becomes cold, but it's just part of those rituals that I have to write. I think I've suffered from writer's block or imposter syndrome for the first few decades of my life. And I'm finally in the place where I can say, I want to write now, and I will. I don't feel that I can't give what other writers can give. I've gathered the knowledge and I've gathered the life experience. So I feel that I can now write. So I have to sit down and do that. I have to be kind to myself too. But sometimes when I get stuck, I will grab a poet, two things, either a poetry volume or a writing manual. And I'll read through it until I find a word, and then I'll just write that down until I found a few words, and then the writing will come. Sometimes I only write one sentence, but it's one sentence more that I would have written if I didn't write anything. I'm not a quick writer. I see some of my fellow writing friends, they write 5,000, 10,000 words a day. I can't. Sometimes I can only write 150 words a day, and I'm happy with those 150 words. I very seldom need to go back and edit out 5,000 words that I just wrote, and it's meaningless to me. So I'm a different kind of writer. My writing tutor once said, Elizabeth, don't worry if you can't vomit out words. So that made me feel better about not writing 10,000 words, but that's my writing style. Someone else will be able to vomit out 10,000 words, but then they need to clean up a bit afterwards. And that's also fine. It's just their way of writing. And sometimes people can write 10,000 words and it's just perfect, but I'm not like that. So I need to be kind to my style of writing, my way of writing. That means that it will take me 2-3 years to produce something that I think can be published. But that's just how we are. I think be kind to yourself, always, even as a writer, just as you would have been kind to another writer. But then also a deadline helps. That's why I like being in a writer's group. It sets a deadline. You need to be able to produce something. I'm not in the phase where people are craving to have my work so that I have a publisher that says, okay, we need your book by next year. I'm not there yet. But I need to do that for myself. I need to have a deadline. You want to send this to an editor and then to a publisher by that date. So I think setting deadlines is also a way of getting over your writer's block. But again, you can get people who can panic so much that a deadline will just drive them over the cliff. So just be kind to yourself and be who you are. But that rhythm, that ritual, I think it's very important, like Yvette said. What do you think, Mary? You're also a writer. How do you do this?
Yeah, I agree with that, with what you have said, both of you have said. It's kind of a subjective thing, and it's very dependent on individual personalities. And all the suggestions given are brilliant ideas. And again, I fall back on passion. If you really have the passion, you can circumvent and surmount anything that comes in your way. And yeah, like as what Elizabeth has mentioned, be kind to yourself. We need to do that. Creativity comes when you're really calm, when you are collected, and sometimes it can come in the midst of chaos, particularly if you're writing something like fiction. To me, I feel if you write fiction in the midst of chaos, your mind is in a chaotic state. You can come up with weird things. And who knows, maybe J.K. Rowling was in that state when she wrote. And therefore, she came up with ideas of wizardry and all of that she put out there, and which became a huge success. So I guess it also depends on what you're writing. If you're writing nonfiction, you're writing about your own story, your own experiences, realities of life. I would think that I'm a better writer if I can write when I'm calm, collected, and reminiscing over experiences, reminiscing over my reality, which could, of course, would be quite similar to the realities of the people who would buy my book, for example. I mean, if I were to write about family, I mean, every one of us can relate to that topic. So if I were to write something about family conflicts, I think every reader who buys the book because they want to know about family communication, for example, would be able to connect. I mean, to a large extent, we're all one. We're all one. The difference is just the culture, the traditional, the upbringing. That's about it. The rest of it, we're all one. We all feel happy. We all feel sad. Our emotions are the same, but it's just the variation, the variance there, like we call the COVID variance. It's just a variation there. Thank you so much, ladies. You guys are brilliant. Your ideas are totally in line with what potential upcoming writers go through and will go through. These are not things that only a certain group will go through. Every writer would go through this. The questions are brilliant. Your answers were brilliant. And I totally enjoyed your authentic, true to yourself answers, just like how it was in the first session. Writers are very authentic. If you're not authentic, then you better be writing nonfiction. A fiction. Because in fiction, you can write anything and it gets away with it. Yeah, so thank you so much again, ladies. I look forward to talking to you, both of you again, in another panel discussion, a Q&A session perhaps, or even a short speech about your book, both your books. Thank you so much again to the audience. If you have any questions that you would like our panelists to answer, please jot it down, get it down in the comments, and we will answer your questions, definitely. This group is here to help humanity, to help people. The Love app is all about uplifting the world, uplifting humanity. So we will be there for you. Do not be afraid. Just come forward and put down your questions. And our service is complimentary, free of charge. So because we want to help people to become writers. Thank you very much. And we see you again in the next session, which will be the third session of the Writers Bureau. See you guys. See you, girls.